So it seems Sony struck again with regards to making a lot of money off of a film that, let's be honest, wasn't all that great. So it's no surprise that they're like, all right, let's keep this going. Let's keep on marching through. No, no stopping now. Let's crank them out. So at this point, let's just see what they have in store for us. I mean, I'm not expecting much at this point. We'll see.
You feel like home to me. Like family.
Oh, wow.
You could just say I'm happy for you.
That was going to be us.
I am happy for you.
No!
God, I'm so sorry.
Not sorry.
These two need some serious couples counseling.
Venom-Let Carnage is directed by Andy Serkis with a screenplay by Kelly Marcel and a story by Tom Hardy and Kelly Marcel. The film stars Tom Hardy, Michelle Williams, Naomie Harris, Reid Scott, Stephen Graham, and Woody Harrelson. According to IMDb's plot synopsis, Eddie Brock attempts to reignite his career by interviewing serial killer Cletus Cassidy, who becomes the host of the symbiote Carnage and escapes prison after a failed execution. Despite the negative reception, Venom made $850 million off of a budget, if I remember correctly, of like 50 to 60 million. So it made its money back plenty. A lot of people, when saw it, no matter what the reactions were, it made Sony a ton of money. And with that, a sequel was pretty much immediate, as they had set up in the first movie in one of the post-credit scenes of an iconic Spider-Man villain, or Venom, but still, and that is Carnage. Carnage being one of another Spider-Man villain slash, I guess, Venom villains that they wanted to bring to life. This character has been brought to life in animated form, so let's see what he would be like on the big screen as a whole as the main antagonist. When I came out of this film, I thought this was better than the first film. And little side note, no matter what I feel about this movie, I have to thank this film for one thing, which is this did help me launch my reviews on Instagram back in 2021. Like, this was the thing that helped launch where I'm at now. I had done movie reviews on Twitter for a long time, but once I did it on Instagram, this was the movie that pretty much started that. And no matter what, regardless on my outcome of this movie does hold a place with regards to where my start was, which was 3 years ago. And it's just crazy to me that here we are in 2024, and I'm still doing this. It's wild and insane to me to think that I'm still here. But regardless, after rewatching this film in preparation for The Last Dance, I walked away still thinking, it's okay. It's not a terrible movie by any means. I think it's still an improvement over the first, but I'm not going to sit here and say that it's amazing. There are some moments of this movie I enjoy, but there are still a few issues that I saw with this film. Before delving deep into that and discussing the problems, here are the positives that I have. Performances are fun. Tom Hardy is still enjoyable as both Eddie Brock and Venom. Hardy still brings the energy to both characters, though their relationship becomes a little bit more goofier and a little bit gayer, if you will. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean the movie pretty much clearly is really saying that Venom loves Eddie, okay? Like, loves him. And this movie makes a lot of allegories of him being pretty much gay. I think both Brock and Venom work well together because of Hardy's performance, and I think that's the best that I can say with regards to those characters, because, alright, now we're getting into a little bit more of the goofier nature of this character. Woody Harrelson is entertaining as Cletus Cassidy / Carnage. Harrelson goes wacky and zany as a deranged serial killer who goes on a rampage in this film. Both Cassidy and Carnage are terrifying together when they do team up, and when they fight both Eddie and Venom, they are a force to be reckoned with. They are very much a scary duo to come across. They are both terrifying, and they do give off this creepy nature vibe that you just don't want to mess with. And so I do give credit to Harrelson for at least trying to make Cleese Cassidy as terrifying as he can be. But I mean, like, he's a ton of fun. He's a blast. I never deny Woody Harrelson. And thankfully in this movie, he does not have a ridiculous stupid wig that they gave him near the end of the last film. Thankfully, his haircut's a little bit better and more sustainable than the wig that he was given in the last movie. The direction is solid. Andy Serkis creates a moody and dark film that makes it atmospheric. He truly wanted to make this like the comics in terms of how they approach the feeling of this to be as dark and as level-headed as possible with regards to trying to be a little bit more scarier, if you will, and a little bit more like what the comics of depicting Venom is supposed to be like, or even some of the other characters that are appearing in either Spider-Man or Venom comics. I do like the approach that Andy Serkis had, which was trying to make it as dark and gritty as possible. I mean, this is still a PG-13 movie, but regardless, I still give him credit for trying to, at the very least, being able to take it as far as it can with regards to the look appeal and the way it's all put together. The cinematography is stunning. Cinematographer Robert Richardson shoots a dark and tight film that makes it feel creepy, making this more of a comic book film than the first movie. The first movie is more slick, stylistic comic book movie. This feels more like comic book panel with regards to some of the shots in this movie. And the fact that it was shot pretty much like IMAX is, I think, the best way to handle this film in terms of its look appeal, because it does lend itself to the atmospheric part of this movie being dark and gritty, and to have the styling of what Robert Richardson brings is, I think, pretty well, and it does add a little bit more character to the movie. The music is eerie. Composer Marco Beltrami crafts a score that complements the film's tone. It lends a more scarier style than the previous movie. Now, unfortunately, there's no Ludwig Göransson here, but the score we do get, it does complement the movie, just like the cinematography. It does lend itself to the more sinister and creepier nature of this movie, with it having to deal with Carnage, Cleese Cassidy, both very terrifying, very formidable foes in the world of Spider-Man, and a very dangerous one at best. And so to have that score still be there to add a little bit of urgency, or at the very least a creep factor, I think, as well, because it does add to the nature of what Carnage and Cleese Cassidy is as both a serial killer and a more deranged symbiote. The action is clear. Unlike the first film, the action is exciting and better handled, not as frantic and chaotic as what the previous movie had, because I felt like the previous movie's action just kind of felt like it was wonky. It was all put together in a way that just kind of felt very messy and very much slimy in a way, and in regards to how the styling of the symbiotes work. And I think that's what I like about this movie a little bit more than the first, is that at least the action's a little bit more clear. I can see what's going on more than the last movie with regards to how the action is going down. And it does lend to a pretty interesting and fun climax that does see both Venom and Carnage going and battling each other out. And I do appreciate the more darker elements of this movie adding to the film, although again, it's still PG-13. There's no blood or anything in that regard, but it does lend itself to the violent tone of what Carnage is. The pacing and runtime is better. It never drags on, but it keeps going. With a runtime of 1 hour and 37 minutes, it's more reasonable than what the first movie offered, because that first movie was near 2 hours. I don't understand why they chose that was going to be a 2 hour movie. That was ridiculous, and that was stupid of them. So for this one to be a little bit less than 2 hours and being around like an hour and a half, I think is more reasonable and a little bit more stomachable for me, because I just don't think that first movie should have never been near 2 hours. So thankfully they reduced the runtime on this one. Though an improvement, there's still some problems that hurts this film from being as good as it can be. So now here are the negatives with it. Police subplot is pointless. This storyline doesn't add much to the film's plot. This could have been removed from the movie. This involves Stephen Graham's character, Detective Mulligan, who is another character in the world of Spider-Man, and has a symbiote in the form of Toxin, which will appear in The Last Dance. But I just don't think this storyline adds much to the movie, because I just feel like in the end, this plot was just there to just get to Cleus getting Carnage and then having them bow out. I feel like there could have been so many other ways of having to get to that plot rather than just wasting time with a police procedural, and it just doesn't lend itself much, and it's not as in-depth as it could have been, so there's really no point of this storyline being here. The writing is messy. Writer Kelly Marcel struggles to blend the dark elements and the humor. It still feels inconsistent with itself. It's still finding itself a hard time with trying to blend nowadays we know as like what we kind of expect with the MCU to do. It just is struggling with trying to be that balance, that even balance of dark parts and comedy bits, and it's just not gelling well, and so I think she struggles under the weight of what the idea of this movie is supposed to be. The visuals are lacking, though the designs still look good for the most part, both Venom and Carnage and their look appeal. The results are still half-baked. It all looks too smooth and lifeless at certain points, especially when Carnage bonds with Cletus. You could definitely tell how much the visual effects are very much half-baked and just kind of thrown together because it doesn't look finished enough to what it should be. And for that, I think that's a huge letdown, especially compared to the first movie. I think both of the movies have lacked with regards to its visual effects. The side characters are flat. Outside of Brock and Cassie, I found most of the other characters to be kind of distracting to me. Though Shriek, who is another character from the comics, would have been a good addition, she's not given a whole lot. Naomie Harris, I feel like they kind of a little bit wasted her in this movie, and she's just kind of there because of, well, she's connected to Cletus, and she's a, kind of a character, so we gotta have her in here. But she barely does a lot of things. All she kind of does is stare and scream at certain points, but otherwise, there's nothing much that they add to her and what she could do with regards to her powers and what she could bring to this movie. And so do the other characters, Michelle Williams being brought back. I don't understand why they are, because I feel like they're just kind of more of a drag on this film than it is like of them adding to the movie. I think it's just a huge disappointment because you have some pretty talented actors in here and you just kind of barely use them, as I think a huge disappointment, especially since they're supposed to be your side characters. These are supposed to be your characters that you grow to at least like, and most of the time you just kind of sit there like, I don't really care about these. It's an improvement over the first, no doubt about it, but it still stumbles over itself. Some decent ideas, but could have been retooled and tightened up a bit. It's a decent follow-up at best. It's not something that I'm gonna jump over and scream over, but at the same time, it's better than the first. And from what I've seen of the Sony Spider-Verse films, yeah, like the live-action movies, yes, this is definitely better than most of the other ones that have come out throughout its 10 years. So I'm gonna give Venom: The Last Dance a 6 out of 10. It's okay. It's alright. It's not something I'm crazy about, but it's something that I don't mind watching it. I'm not hating it throughout most of this movie. It still, though, shoots itself in the foot a couple of times with regards to trying to balance out the comedy and dark elements, characters, and visuals. But at the end of the day, I mean, this is as best as I could say about a Sony live-action Spider-Verse movie, because at the very least, it's not an origin story that's at least good, because the last two movies so far they have done outside of Venom have just been origin stories, and they have been pretty bad, to say the least. So now I will be doing Venom: The Last Dance, and then October can be over and we can move on to November. So yes, look forward to those reviews and other movie TV show reviews coming soon.